I don't know about you, but like every time I go to the grocery store and I get a cart, I get the one that rattles the entire time through the store. Anybody else? Yeah, we're all shopping at the same place. Yep. Here's the thing. It's a miserable experience, okay? Don't get me wrong. You can still accomplish the purpose. You can still get your shopping done. But the whole time, I'm rattled by that wheel that just seems to have something on it. That's all I can think about. And there are some stores that are worse than others. We won't mention any names, but it might rhyme with Malwart, okay? So, here's the thing. I tell myself, you can totally handle it, Snyder. It'll be fine. It's just a small little rattle in the wheel. And then halfway through the store, I'm crossing things off the grocery list because I ain't got time to handle the cart anymore. Or if I know it's going to be particularly bad, sometimes I'll just go in and I'm like, I can manhandle these things on my way out myself. I'll just carry them all. And then I'm walking through the store with people looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you get a cart? And I want to say, you know the carts, they're terrible. Isn't it amazing how something little like that can throw off a whole experience? And we experience it in different areas of our life, but I think that is especially true in your journey and in mine, in our spiritual journey. There are little things that can rattle us and distract us from what God intended. And Jesus would teach often about the abundant life with Him. He would talk about how there's a thief that wants to steal, kill, and destroy that abundant life. How God came to help us experience freedom and His peace. He cares about your journey. He cares about my journey. And I think we're drawn to some of those passages, but if we're going to experience the freedom that He offers, we're actually going to have to trust Him. We're going to have to follow what He says is true. In fact, that's the memory verse for this series that we've been walking through over these last few weeks. And since this is the finale of the series, I'm going to invite you to say it out loud one more time together, whatever campus you're at, wherever you're watching. If you're here for the very first time, celebrating with some family members or friends who had their children dedicated today, let's say this passage wherever you're at out loud together right now. Jesus said to the people who believed in Him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." This is really what we've been exploring. And I know the misconception is that Christianity is a list of rules to follow, when in reality, Christianity is good news of what Jesus accomplished for us. And when we begin to remain faithful to that good news, we begin to see what's true, and the truth sets us free. I mean, Jesus ultimately is talking about how we can fully follow Him. And these truths that He teaches help guide every area of our life. Every domain is the word that we've been using. A domain of your life is an aspect of your life that is influenced, it is guided, it is controlled by something or someone, whether you know it or not. Culture has things to say about the domains of our life. Your past, your upbringing, your preferences, your friends, and Jesus. He has something to say about every domain, every aspect, and this is what we've been looking at over the past 4 weeks. The first week we started with was spiritual. See, most people think that this is the only aspect of your life that Jesus has anything to say about it. That's not true. But it starts with how you view God, and do you trust Him as your shepherd, your leader of your life? And as you begin to listen to God and read what Jesus teaches, you're going to see that Jesus has some things to say about our physical body and our mental and emotional health, how you view you. And so we talked about a couple weeks ago how to honor God with our body and our minds. And then as you continue to follow Jesus, you're going to see that He has things to say about the relational and the ecclesiological, which is just a fancy word for church. Basically, it's how you view and interact with others in your life. And the word that Jesus gives us is to agape them, to love them the same way that we ourselves have been loved by God. And today, we're going to talk about your vocational and financial domain. So if you're just joining us, welcome to Cedar Creek, whatever campus you're at. Those of you watching at TOCI, the men there, or if you're watching on TV. For those of you physically, we just put your hands together to welcome our online audience and people, the men at TOCI, to say hello to them. If this is your first week, this is our finale. I think the content is relevant. I think it's helpful. But this is also part of a larger conversation. And so if we're going to focus on the vocational and financial domain, what do I mean by that? Basically, this is how you view and use your time, vocation, and your stuff or your money, financial. Have you ever thought about how you make decisions with your time and your money? I mean, most of the time we just focus on that word your, like it's my time and my money. How do I make more of my time? And how do I make more money for me? But who shaped that? Like, where did that come from? Like, did they give you good advice? Like, oftentimes, the way that we spend money, the way that we schedule our lives is based on a reaction to something. It may be the way that you were raised. Your parents, your upbringing, you're like, I never want to have to experience that again. So I'm going to make all of these decisions over there. That's the truth that's guiding your life. Or maybe it's a reaction to what you see on social media. Isn't it amazing how an influencer can talk about a knickknack that you didn't even know existed and suddenly add to cart and it's in your mailbox or on your front porch in a couple days? Like, have you ever thought about what guides the decisions that you make? We know what we are doing. We just don't always know why or who is behind it. Alistair McIntyre, he's a philosopher and author. He illustrates this principle in his book called After Virtue. And his illustration that to help us see this goes like this. I want you to imagine that you're at the checkout line at a grocery store, right? Okay, you're standing there, you're waiting, and a stranger comes up to you while you're waiting in line, somebody that you've never met, you do not recognize, and they look you in the eye and they say, the name for the common wild duck is Histrionicus histrionicus. What would you do? I mean, you're probably like, I think I understand the words, but I don't know why that's being said to me. What Alistair McIntyre is illustrating is that in order to understand the illustration, we try to place it in a story to make sense of it. And so perhaps that individual has some developmental disabilities. That would explain this potential behavior. That's the story that you could tell. Or maybe he looked at you and was mistaking you for someone else that maybe he saw a day or a week before and they were having a conversation somewhere, maybe at the library, like what's the Latin name for the common wild duck? And he looked at you and thought it was the person that he saw before, and so he was giving you the answer. That could explain the story. Or maybe he's a Russian spy. And that's the call sign for his informant where he's about to make a play, right? See, the story that you tell yourself, the story that you believe will shape how you respond. And depending on that story, one of your responses could be to kill the man. If he's a Russian spy, it sounds intense, but you would want to eliminate him. But if he really just has some developmental disability, then your reaction, even though that was the story you're telling yourself, would be a tragedy. If you think about it, depending on the story, you could call the police, you could ignore them, you could try to talk it out and connect the data. McIntyre's point is that your time and your money won't make sense until you put it into the right story. And too often, we don't put it in the right story, and it ends up making a mess of our life. We end up living life with a rattle that just doesn't seem to bring the peace and the freedom that Jesus offers. Why? Well, when we don't put it in the right story, then work becomes our identity. You can't separate you from what you do. It's the only way you feel valued, you find fulfillment. And so it gives us like this bitter but necessary relationship with our work. You get bitter about the work, but you need it. So you're a doctor, and you really don't have any value outside of that. You're a teacher, that's your role. And yes, teaching is so hard, but that's where you find value and worth. You're a mom. That's your role, that's your title, that's your identity. See, it's the primary place that you find fulfillment. It's through what you do, no longer who God says that you are. And this is why we become addicted to our work, because we need it to feel valued. And so when the work is good, when we feel valued, it's like life is good. But when we go on vacation, or we have a break, or we can't work, or we retire, we don't know what to do. We get bored, or we get depressed. Work has become our identity, which then means anxiousness becomes a pattern. And don't think of like the scared of the dark anxiousness, or scared of, like the boogeyman. I'm talking more about this restless worrying. Will I be successful enough? Will we have enough? Am I advancing enough? Will they like me enough? See, we restlessly chew on these things, because if work is our identity, that success goes to our head. We need it to feel valued, but failure goes to our heart, and so we fear it. And so we keep living in this state of anxiousness that drives both of those things, which then gives birth to a desire for more that consumes us. Just a little bit more money, and then we'll be set. Just a little bit more success, and then I will have arrived. Just a few more years, and then we'll be okay. If I could just get a little bit more done off of my to-do list, then I can relax. When more drives your life, you're in a cycle where you will never have enough. And friends, that's not the life that Jesus intended. And so, Jesus would often tell stories, parables, to help people make sense of their life. And the story that I want to look at today is the parable of the talents. I know many of you probably have heard it before. I'm going to invite you to listen to it with fresh ears and to ask God to help you see how to make sense of your time and your money according to Jesus' perspective. Matthew, one of Jesus' disciples, recorded this story. Jesus is teaching crowds, and he says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. Jesus is illustrating what life in God's kingdom, what life with God is like. God is the master, and we are the servants, which for some of you might cause you to flinch. It's like, I don't want to be called a servant. I ain't a servant of nobody. Well, here's the thing. Typically, the title servant only bothers someone if they think they're the king. And when Jesus is talking, he's reminding us that we're not, okay? Remember, Jesus is telling a story to help us make sense of our life, of our time, of our money. And notice how the master is talked about. The master entrusts his money to the servants. He's giving his resources to his servants while he's gone, which means he thinks highly of his servants. He's like, take care of this while I'm gone. I trust you with this. The same is true for you and me today. The fact that you're alive means that God, the source of life, has entrusted some of his essence, his resources into you. You didn't decide to be born. The fact that you're here means God wanted you to be here. And so he has also given us earthly resources. And when you begin to see that he has entrusted us with that, it begins to change the way that you view your time, your stuff, your life. And so here's what's interesting. As Jesus goes on, he says, the master gave 5 bags of silver to one servant, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities, and then he left on his trip. The audience would have noticed right out of the gate as Jesus is sharing that to the first servant, he gave the giant box, the 5 bags of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Come on, somebody, you know that that's a treasure right there. So good. To the second service, he gave 2, not even really half. And to the last servant, he gave 1 bag. Okay? What do you notice? It's not equal. Isn't that true for you and me? Isn't it true that some have been given more than others, which creates a little bit of a problem? I mean, if God loves us all the same, Why doesn't he give us all the same amount? Like, what does this mean? Does he love them more than he loves me? Or no, I think what Jesus is inviting us to do is to stop comparing. The amount matters way more to us than it does to our master. Because as you're going to see, it's not how much you have, it's what you do with it that counts. So, the servant who received the 5 bags of silver, as Jesus said, began to invest the money and earned 5 more. And the servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. Do you notice the words that Jesus is using? Invested, earned, went to work. Jesus is saying to his audience, to you and me, your work, your time, your resources, what you do with your life, it matters to God. It especially becomes clear when you compare it with the third servant who received 1 bag of silver. He dug a hole in the ground and he hid the master's money. He didn't steal it. He didn't spend it all or waste it on himself. No, he buried it in the ground. And there's lots of debate about the significance of the burying. But one interesting word to me is that he hid the master's money. He didn't want anybody to know that the master had entrusted that money to him. He thought he could hide it and keep it secret. And what was he hoping for? Well, I think, which was common in the first century, as a master would go away, they may not come back. They may not survive the trip. And so he was hoping he could potentially just keep the money for himself. So Jesus continues. After a long time, after many months, maybe many years, the master returned from his trip and called them to give an account for how they had used his money. I mean, some people in Jesus' story would have wondered if the master was ever going to return, wondered if maybe he had died. After a long time, he returns again. Side note, this is where you and I are at in God's story. Eventually, Jesus Christ, our master, will return to check in with all of us, and he's going to ask with anticipation and excitement, what did you do with the life that I gave you? And so just like that, the master is checking in after a long trip with all of the servants, and the first servant comes up and he says, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver, and look, I earned 5 more. Boom shakalaka. Cinnamon Toast Crunch for days, okay? Or maybe an afternoon, depending on your appetite. Notice the master's reply. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling the small amount. So now I'm going to give you more opportunity. I'm actually going to give you more work, more responsibilities, more potential. Let's celebrate together. I mean, the master, the audience would have seen the master seeing the work, the investment. And then the master offers more. That's like, wow. And then he says, let's enjoy this together. The master isn't just keeping it for himself. He's sharing it. This is the heart of our master. And then Jesus continues. The servant who received the 2 bags of silver, he comes up and he says, Master, you gave me 2. And so here is 2 more. Now, if you get stuck in a cycle of comparing, you're doing the math. After all of this work, this still doesn't equal the one initial investment in the first servant. It's not equal, but notice the master's response. The master said, well done. Not, halfway. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The audience would have heard the same response. The master sees, he rewards, and he celebrates. The audience would have noticed, you and I should notice, the amount doesn't matter. The master is not comparing totals. He doesn't honor the one with the most over everybody else. He honors those who are faithful with what they've been given, which at this point, the audience would have been curious about the third servant. And so Jesus continues. Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, and harvesting crops you didn't plant, gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. The audience would have been like, that's weird. This servant is living from a different story than the first two. It would have sounded off. I mean, yes, he said, I knew you. I knew you were a harsh man. It's like, really? Like, afraid to lose, so I hid it. He's kind of honest. So here's your money back. I imagine the audience is wondering, how will the master reply? The master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. Harsh words. The master said, if you really knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit the money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. See, the master was not deceived. He saw right through his words. He saw the truth. If the third servant really knew the master was only interested in interest, making money, then he would have invested it, not buried it in the ground. But the truth is, the third servant was wicked, selfish, and lazy. He wanted the benefits of the master's resources, but he didn't want to do anything with it. So what does the master do? He takes his money and he gives it to the first servant. And then Jesus brings it all home by saying, to those who use well what they are given, even more opportunity will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Ultimately, Jesus is teaching, if you really know the master, then your desire will be to use well what the master has given you, which will give more opportunity to use what the master gives you. And ultimately, there will be an abundance as we celebrate and enjoy him forever in heaven. But to those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away because they've never really trusted the master to begin with. I mean, the story that Jesus is telling us is meant to help us make sense of our time and of our money. And there are truths that you can follow about what you have and why you have it. And you can begin to apply that to your life. And you can begin to see God work in you and through you. Or you can do what you've always done. Or you could follow whatever other preferences or voices you want to follow in your life. But if we're going to follow Jesus and experience some of the freedom that he wants us to experience, the first truth, the first question we're going to have to ask is, whose is it? Your life, your time, my time, your abilities, your stuff. Who owns it? I mean, did you create you? Can you take credit for you? I mean, maybe some of you are thinking, but Ben, you don't know how hard I've worked to get to where I'm at today. You don't know what I had to sacrifice to get here. You don't know the years of schooling. Good, that's all of that is good, but who gave you the ability to sacrifice like that? Who gave you the brain and the opportunities and open the connections? See, when we think it's all ours, we think we are owners of it, and the word that Jesus teaches us to think about is stewardship, not ownership. We think it's all ours, and what Jesus invites us to remember is to see what we have been given and to see that we are a steward. We are to care for what has been entrusted to you and to me, which means your body is not yours outright. Your life is not yours alone. Your time is not yours. Your money is not yours. It belongs to our master, and our master, just like the one in the story, has entrusted it to you for the time being to use it well. And when you begin to see that, when we remember whose it all is, we start to view it differently. We use it differently. We prioritize it differently, which then opens the door for us to worry less and enjoy it more, because it's not all ours to lose. It's not all on us. And we also remember that he owns it all. And so what does the master want us to do with the resources that he's entrusted to us? With our life? Well, Jesus said it. He wants us to use it well. What's our assignment? Use your life, use your time, use your money well. And what will the outcome be? More opportunity to experience more of the master in your life. to the point where it will be a celebration and an abundance. I mean, since it's not mine anyway, and it's God's, then maybe the better question when it comes to our time is, God, how can I use the time that I have well? Like, what is success from your point of view? And I want to look at that vocationally. That domain of your life are the truths that guide how you spend your time. The challenge with the word vocationally is because of where we are at in current history, we tend to think of vocation as the place where you get a weekly paycheck or a monthly paycheck. That's a new thought in terms of, if you think about all of human history, most humans' vocation was to take care of their family on what we would call like a small family farm. It was to take care of your family and your home. That was your vocation. So instead of thinking only about where you get a paycheck, instead think about where and how you spend your time, which for some of you is school. That's your current vocation. For others of you, it is your career. It's where you draw a paycheck. For others of you, it's the business that you own. Or maybe you're a stay-at-home parent. That's your vocation. Maybe you're retired. Just because you're not drawing a paycheck doesn't mean you don't have time. How are you using the time? If we're going to use well our vocation, we have to know, the first truth that we have to know is then, who are you working for? See, the misconception that a lot of Christians have is that it's only at church where you do the Lord's work, and the rest of the week you're just making a living. The rest of the week you're just trying to keep the family together. The rest of the week it's just you and your job. That's not the right story. That's not the story that Jesus teaches. I mean, in Colossians, it says that we should work willingly at whatever you do, as though you are working for the Lord, rather than just for people, for your boss, for your supervisor. We're working for Him. Remember, the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. God cares about your work. And when you show up for work, you're not just working for someone or some corporation. You're actually working for God. Your work matters. Even the trivial work matters to Him. This is why we should strive to be excellent in everything that we do. Not because we're trying to impress people. We're working for God. Remember the third servant? He did nothing. He was lazy. So if we're working for God, if every day our time is for God, we should strive to be as productive and joyful and excellent and as trustworthy as we can be. And if you're leading a business or leading a team, you should strive to make it productive and joyful and purposeful and trustworthy. Why? Because excellence honors our excellent God and it inspires people. We're not doing this to get noticed from people. We're doing it to grow in our relationship with God. Because when you learn how to show up at work with the right attitude, the right heart, and the right perspective, remembering that you're working for God, you're going to grow closer to Him through your work. See, a lot of people think that growing closer to God is only through Bible study. No, and it's how you show up on Monday. That's an opportunity to grow in your relationship with Him because you know ultimately who you are working for. And even if you're working for a difficult boss or in a difficult environment, you know that God will make up for it in the end. We got to know who you're working for, but we also need to know what you are working for. You got to know, it's more than just a paycheck. When I was in Greece, one of the archaeological sites that we visited was the city of Corinth. I remember we were driving through the little town and there were some houses there and the bus driver was like, yeah, some of these backyards have an ancient Roman mosaic floor. I'm like, what? It's like all of this old city. And what I never really fully appreciated was how influential the city of Corinth was for much of Europe, even before the Roman Empire. Massive city. It was on two sides of the Mediterranean. It basically had two strategic ports. And so the population just popped off at one point. Hundreds of thousands of people. And so to entertain them, they hosted something called the Isthmian Games, which is like a version of the Olympics. And so they would bring all of these athletes that would train their whole life to compete and entertain the crowds. And the winners of the different events, I learned this, would get a wreath of wild celery. How exciting is that? I don't know about you, but celery is it's basically organized water. Okay, let's be honest. There's no calories here. The only good thing that celery offers is a container, a holder for the peanut butter that you're about to enjoy. This was their prize. And so remember this visual when you hear Paul's words written to Christians in Corinth. He says, all athletes are disciplined in their training. He's like, think of the Isthmian athletes who spend their life disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away. But we work for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I'm not just swinging at the wind. Think about that. Like if these athletes that everybody in Corinth would have known, if they trained their whole lives for a ring of celery, like how long is this ultimately going to last? How much is this worth? About the same amount that money is worth to God. It's temporary. See, when we remember God's truth, we know who we are working for, but we also know what we are working for. We're working for an eternal prize, which means we find ways to use temporary earthly resources, our life here on earth, temporary, our time, temporary, our money, temporary. We try to find ways to use that in things that will last forever. And so, yes, your work matters to God. But when we show up, we should look for ways to make an eternal difference. Because if you're not dead, God's not done with you. If you still have life, God is looking for an ROI on his investment in you. He's looking for an eternal return on that investment. He's looking for you and me to show up in ways, to use resources in ways that are going to show up in heaven. Because the way that you work, the way that you love, the way that you share what God's doing in your life means you're not just going to work for a paycheck. You're looking for opportunities to introduce people to Jesus, to help bring a little bit of heaven to earth. You're finding ways to make an eternal difference. The bottom line is that stewards invest God's temporary resources into eternal opportunities. And the more you place your time, your vocation into that story, the more sense it will make. The more joy you will feel when you go to work, even on difficult days, because you know who you are working for and you are trusting what you are working for, what he's doing through you. The less stress you'll carry, because at the end of the day, at some point, this job will be over. That role will be over. And so I'm going to make the most of the time that I have. I mean, this same principle is true in the financial domain of your life. You know, the area where you think about how you use your money. There is probably no other domain of your life where we as humans are more possessive and where we have been influenced more, maybe than you realize, by the voices around us, by the truths that they teach us about our money. And I don't have the time to do a full unpack here. We've actually done whole series on how the Bible teaches us to use time. Like Feed the Pig was a series we did, like the piggy bank, a couple years ago. I actually linked to a few of those talks if you want to go a little bit deeper in the message notes. But here's what Jesus teaches over and over about how to invest our life. He says this in Matthew 6, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, E-R-O-I, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. What's he teaching? He's reminding me and you that our hearts struggle to see what has real value. And so we spend a lot of our time and a lot of our money on stuff that's temporary. We worry about it. We strive to get it. We're jealous when we can't. And Jesus wants to shift our perspective, say, hey, pay attention to the things that are going to last forever. And what is it that's going to last forever? Do you know? It's people. People are what go to heaven and spend eternity with him, not our stuff. It's memories that are going to last forever. Does that mean you can't buy nice things? No. No, you can enjoy nice things. I enjoy nice things. But the word is storing up these things, trying to accumulate more, being driven by them. See, stewards invest God's temporary resources into eternal opportunities. And so what that looks like practically for me is to give, save, and then live on the rest. I teach this to my kids. I actually use percentages with my kids to help them. Give 10%, save 10%, and live on the rest. And then sometimes you can up these. But this gives you a framework. Why do we start with give? We give back to God a tenth, a tithe of what he's given us, what ultimately belongs to him. It's not ours. The Bible calls this first fruits, the first tenth of your harvest. You give back to God. Why? To keep our heart in check. Because our heart tends to want to accumulate and keep and hold on to and own. So the reason we give first is to keep our heart in check. And the second reason we give first, give back to God, not just at charitable organizations, but at a church, is because when you give to a life-giving church, it takes that temporary resource and turns it into an eternal return on that investment. It leads or influences, it helps grow, introducing people to Jesus. It makes heaven more full. I want an EROI on what I'm giving. And so that's where we start. The second is to save for retirement, to save for a difficult season, which means then we live on whatever's left. Usually people do the opposite. They live, and then maybe they save, and then maybe if they have some left over, they'll give. Friends, if that's the story that you're living, it will make a mess of your life. It will be a rattle that you'll never shake. In fact, that's why many people can't give at a local church. It's because they're so far in debt, they feel trapped. It's why every spring and fall we offer Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. It's designed to help you experience the financial freedom the way that God intended, instead of living enslaved to money and job and debt. And listen, you don't have to take my word for it. I'll invite you to listen to the Ness family as they share how God has put them on a journey, a path, to help them find financial freedom.
I got to the point where I was having trouble sleeping, just thinking about all the bills and, all the stuff that was mounting up in my head, that we owe this on this, this on this, this on this. It felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. We've always had steady jobs, but there was still the payments that just every week, every month, there's the same payments one after another, it seemed like.
I think like so many people, you get a raise and then you spend a little more. And then you get another raise and then you want to spend a little bit more after that. And then you get into this vicious cycle and you think that you can keep taking out more debt, and it's not the way it should happen.
So in the fall of 22, I found out that the company that I was working for, the building was going to close. So I've always kind of listened on and off to Dave Ramsey, but knowing that the building that I was going to be working at, there was going to be quite a few people losing their job, it really motivated us to say now is the time to do something. So that's what really drove us to take the financial peace class with Josh.
Nick had an interest, listening to Dave Ramsey all these years, and he's talked about FPU. I just always had one excuse after another why we should or shouldn't do it, and so we decided that we really needed to sit down and look at our finances more closely. And I'm ashamed to say this, but I put my head in the sand and acted like nothing was happening, and all of that pressure was on Nick, and I had like a full-on panic attack, realizing where we were in our life, and that was not what we wanted for ourselves or what we wanted to show our daughter. So I said, okay, we're all in. I'm doing this. I'm stepping into this with you 100%. And Josh Brasi was the best leader we could have had. He was what we needed at that time, and he gave us the tools and resources that we needed to make sure that we were successful. When we stepped into the class, Josh recommended that whoever the spender was should take on the role of the person that saves. It opened my eyes because I sat down and did the budget. Well, we did the budget together, but once I saw everything in black and white on the screen, I had a moment before bed that night that just put me into full panic mode. I cried. I apologized to Nick for all of the stress and that I had put on him, and let him carry alone for all that time. It put me in the driver's seat to make sure that we were moving forward together, to make sure that we paid it off as quickly as possible.
Yeah, when we were in baby step 2, paying off our debt, I was working 40 plus hours on my normal job, and then I got a part-time job delivering pizzas on nights and weekends, just trying to scrape together as much money as possible to pay off that debt, knowing that we would get there. You know, we had a goal in mind. We pushed hard. We made cutbacks. We didn't go out to eat. We sold. You know, anything that wasn't tied down, we sold all kinds of stuff on Facebook Marketplace, trying to make any extra money that we could. And then I think it was 15 months, we paid off over $135,000 in consumer debt. And then on February 12th of 2024, I found out that I was gonna lose my job. But that same week was when we made the final payment to pay off all our consumer debt. So it was more of an inconvenience. It wasn't that big of a deal because I knew that we had that financial freedom, and there was no panic. We had a plan. We were working on saving up an emergency fund. So I was fortunate enough to be able to take 3 months off of work, spend some time with my family, and I was able to look and find a job that's perfect fit for me, and I was able to find that. And now the company that I work for is such a great company. I really enjoy working there, and one of the main parts of my job now is to try and save the company money. So I really enjoy that because it relates to things that we did in our personal life.
It's afforded us the opportunities to do fun things and not feel guilty, and you know, we try to give back as much as we can by volunteering and also by tithing.
Dave Ramsey always says, live like no one else, so later you can live and give like no one else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't fun delivering pizzas, and on a Saturday afternoon, missing football games, but I'm listening to Dave Ramsey, motivating me to keep working hard, and it was totally worth it. The stress of money is gone now, and we sleep a lot better at night. Just having financial peace, it's totally worth the short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Yeah.
And that's family. If you're watching, thank you for sharing your story. You all are the story that God is writing. And you have a story worth sharing. But oftentimes when you're in the middle of financial challenges, nobody really wants to be like, hey, we're struggling here. Oftentimes within a couple, it's the source of a lot of tension. And so my hope is that you find some freedom. You stop letting it rattle you. Instead, take intentional steps. Make it an area of spiritual growth. It could change your life. If you'd like to take financial peace, you can check in with our campus teams. I think we'll be offering it again this fall. We may be doing an abbreviated summer version at some of our campuses. But today, right now, wherever you're watching, wherever you're seated, it's an invitation. Step into the truth that Jesus teaches about your time and about your money. He's inviting you to see yourself as a steward, a caretaker of what he's given you. And so when you go to work, you're You're not just working for someone, you're working for God. When you go to school, see beyond the book. When you're at home with your kids, you're investing in the faith of the next generation. When you think about your money and your stuff, instead of serving it and being enslaved, indebted to it, make it serve eternal purposes. We want it to show up in heaven. Because when our master returns, which he will, my hope, my prayer is that you will hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Let's invest God's temporary resources of time and money into eternal opportunities. As you think about that, we've invited you to experience a guided prayer in hopes that it will allow God to speak to you. And so what is it that God's saying to you right now? Will you think about that? What step is he inviting you to take? What are you going to do about it? Our prayer each and every time that you come is that you would be responsive to God today and all year long.
Jesus,